I would now request Rotarian Anand Dalal to introduce our guest speaker, Ms. Alisha Mashruwala Daswani.
Alisha is the CEO and founder of OnCourse, founded in 2010, an education consulting company that assists students with their studies abroad and their applications and test prep for undergraduate as well as postgraduate education. Over the past 10 years, OnCourse has worked with over 2,000 students and now has offices in Mumbai, Delhi, Gurgaon, and Ahmedabad. And with the use of various technology platforms, caters to students across the world. OnCourse now has a team of approximately 100 people across the various cities and has students placed in the top universities like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, amongst others. Alisha herself graduated from Harvard in 2011 with a degree in psychology and a minor in economics. A few years ago, Alisha was featured in Femina's Top 30 Under 30 Women in India. In addition, she is an education columnist for The Afternoon and also has written for the DNA in the past. Alisha has been invited to speak at various leadership and education panels across the country. Before starting OnCourse at Harvard, Alisha was the captain at the Harvard squash team and a member of the Women in Business organization. Moreover, she represented India at the World and Asian Squash Games and was a 5-time national junior champion. Alisha has always believed in giving back to the society and is now India fundraising chair and board member of Khel Shala, an NGO that focuses on sports and academics. Over to you, Alisha.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction. And first of all, thank you so much for having me to do this session. I'm excited to speak to all of you and hopefully give you some information about education opportunities abroad. There are some familiar faces here, so just nice to see all of you. So I'm going to start, if I can share my screen with the PowerPoint. Yes. Can everybody see the screen? I think so. Okay. Great. So I'll just, I think Mr. Dalal has already given a very extensive background about us. So OnCourse did start in 2010. I was still in college when we started the company, and we're about 5 founders, 2 of us, my husband Akhil and myself, based in Bombay, and then Nitin, Neeraj, and Abhishek, who are based in Delhi and Gurgaon offices as well. As Mr. Dalal mentioned, we do have networks all across the world and offices everywhere as well. And our main focus is on undergraduate education abroad, postgraduate education abroad, and test prep primarily for SAT, ACT, GMAT, things like that. So I think today I want to talk a lot about the college application process, what the structure is like at different countries, how it works, and also for a lot of you who probably have students who are potentially starting up with this process, what they need to be preparing from now as well. And of course, we'll leave some time for questions towards the end. So I'm going to start with the structure of education, primarily in the US, UK, Canada, Singapore, Hong Kong, Europe, and India, to give you a broad overview of how these vary and how they differ, specifically at the undergraduate level. I'll start with the US because that does tend to be the most comprehensive of all of the countries. So typically, when you are preparing yourself for an application to universities in the US, a lot of what you have to do will also be covered for applications to other countries as well. So typically, when you're applying to a US university, there are 4 broad categories of essentially what you can choose to apply for. So the first one being the liberal arts. So I'm going to go in depth into each of these areas. So the liberal arts essentially is an umbrella term that's focused on flexibility, right? So it includes about 150 subjects that you can choose from. So this includes your pure sciences, so including things like physics, chemistry, biology, math, computer science, environmental science. It also includes your humanities-based subjects. So that includes things like, say, philosophy, languages, English, writing, arts, all of that. And it includes your social sciences. So that entails things like political science, economics, international relations, history, psychology. All of that falls in that social science bucket. So very often when people hear the term liberal arts, they consider it to be purely a humanities-based stream, when in fact, it's actually just the short form for liberal arts and sciences, which is an all-encompassing field, right? So the way it's structured is it's a 4-year curriculum where it's built on the idea that at the age of 16 or 17, when a student is looking to apply to university, they might not have complete clarity in terms of what exactly they want to study. So they have the opportunity to go into university, be able to explore amongst all of these subject areas. So including the sciences, social sciences, and humanities. And then towards the end of your first year, closer to your second year, start to take a more educated decision in terms of what you might want to focus on and what you might want to major in. So by the end of the second year, most students will declare what's called your major or your specialization. And for the next couple of years, you focus a little bit more on that. So essentially, the liberal arts is that flagship program, which is great for students who either are unsure about what they might want to study, or for students who have a lot of diverse and varied interests as well. So giving my personal example, when I went to university, I thought I wanted to major in economics. That was always my plan. Once I kind of understood a little bit more about psychology as a field and subject, I switched my major to psychology and then decided to just take courses which would enable me to get that minor in economics. So it is kind of one of those areas where, you know, especially students in India who very often are pigeonholed into either commerce stream or arts stream or humanities stream, get that broader base to explore. The second type of program is business. So business is great for students who have that clarity saying this is sort of exactly what I want to study, but at the same time may not know what aspect of business they want to eventually specialize in. So it is still a 4-year curriculum where the first couple of years you do explore, but the exploration is within things like marketing, finance, human resource management, strategy, accounting. You'll have things like real estate management, sports management. So you get, again, a broad idea of what business as an overall field entails. And then once you've explored aspects within business in your second year, you choose your major or specialization within business. The third broad field, which is engineering. So very often we get this question a lot, in fact, where students wonder the difference between engineering and, say, studying physics, chemistry, math, biology, computer science under the liberal arts. The main difference here is that engineering focuses a little bit more on the practical application, whereas within the liberal arts, when you study the sciences, it's more theoretical in nature. So when you go into an engineering field or an engineering degree, you still have that opportunity to explore different types of engineering. So you have that opportunity to take courses related to mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, computer engineering, civil engineering, and then that 1 year or so where you again explore amongst these areas and then choose what you want to specialize in or major in while you're there. So typically when you look at it, business and engineering are flexible, but they may not have the exact amount of flexibility that the liberal arts typically gives them. The good part of a US education is that regardless of which stream you choose to do, every university gives you some leeway to take elective courses. So even if you are studying engineering or business and you want to take that one odd philosophy class or that one odd psychology class, you still have that opportunity to do so. And the last field, which is a little bit more technical in nature, it tends to be art and design, architecture, so very skill-oriented program. Those are slightly less flexible, where it's built for a student who is pretty sure that they want to study something related to the design space. So when they go into college, of course, they still have some opportunity to explore areas within art and design and then choose what they want to specialize in. The only problem is when you're doing something so in depth like an art and design, it's slightly harder to take electives which fall outside of your more creative space. So that just gives you a broad overview of the undergraduate style of education in the US. Typically, a lot of the top universities primarily offer the liberal arts. So a lot of times people ask, if you want to get into business in the future, do you have to study business at the undergraduate level? Very often, when you want to apply for an MBA or apply for a master's, which is a little bit more business oriented, many students do come from liberal arts engineering backgrounds as well. So none of these doors really close out too many opportunities later from a career perspective. Okay, I'll move on to Canada. Canada is similar. I would say it's the cousin of the US in that sense, where they do still offer some level of flexibility, not as much. So typically when you go into a Canadian university, again, like the US, it is a 4-year degree. where the structure is split into more the pure and applied sciences. So again, more physics, chemistry, math, biology, computer science, the social sciences and humanities. So again, that includes a little bit more of legal studies, economics, politics, international relations, math, computing and technology, management, which is similar to business, and then the engineering field. So what typically happens in Canada is that whole broad base of liberal arts is still split into humanities, social sciences, and then the sciences as separate departments. So when you do enter a university in Canada, you do have to decide which stream you would like to go into. And then the flexibility they afford you is within that one stream. So if you are studying something like a biology, it will still be easy to switch to a chemistry, but maybe a little bit harder to move to, say, a computer science, which might fall in the different stream altogether. So if I were to look at sort of a overall flexibility scale where I put US as a 10 on 10 in terms of flexibility, Canada falls somewhere around that 7 on 10 structure itself. Moving on to the complete opposite now. So when you look at countries like UK, Singapore, Hong Kong, India, a lot of the Commonwealth countries, other than Canada, of course, is the flexibility dies down. So the UK is great for students who have clarity in terms of what exactly they want to study. So just the opposite of the US, where you go in and you explore. In the UK, when you apply to universities, you need to know what the subject or what the course you're most interested in is. Right? So this is why the UK tends to be a 3-year degree for majority of the programs, whereas the US and Canada tend to be 4-year degrees. So when you apply to the UK, you choose one area of specialization. And the tough part is when you go to the UK, if while you're studying there, you realize, okay, this is not exactly the course I am meant to do, you typically would need to reapply if you want to change your major completely. So UK, again, like I said, that's why that 1 year that the US offers in flexibility kind of gets cut off in the UK, where you just have that 3-year degree where you go in depth into that area. So again, this is great for students who have that focus, who say, okay, I'm quite sure I want to do just mechanical engineering, or I'm quite sure I want to focus primarily on psychology, because then you go purely in depth into those subject areas and you don't need to worry too much about taking courses outside of that you may not particularly like to do. So the UK, I mean, the Indian education for the most part, Singapore, Hong Kong are sort of modeled around the UK education system, where you do still need that clarity in terms of what you want to do. Unless, of course, in India, you are looking at the newer age universities like Ashoka, Kriya, Jindal, Flame, new universities like Plaksha all coming up, which tend to lend some kind of flexibility similar to the US education system. And lastly, I go into Europe. So the reason I don't club Europe into the UK curriculum is it's very university specific. So they do have certain universities that give you the flexibility of the liberal arts similar to the US, but the spectrum is not as broad. So when you do a liberal arts program in Europe, you typically will focus primarily on either the humanities or, say, the social sciences, not as much in the sciences. So for someone who's very keen on the sciences, then typically they would go into a slightly more focused program in Europe. So Europe is one of those areas that kind of lends both options, the flexibility that someone might need and the focus program that someone else might prefer to study. And this is very country specific. It's very university specific. So you do have universities in Germany that are more focused, but maybe universities in Netherlands that give you this broad flexibility overall. So this is a general structure of education in each of these countries. And this is just that curriculum comparison in terms of flexibility that they do offer. Okay. So now that we've spoken a little bit about what to expect when you go to university, I think the big question is what to do at this stage when you're applying for these universities. So again, when I talk about admission criteria, I like to start primarily with the US because it's again all encompassing. So in the US, typically we follow this 50-30-20 rule, where 50% of the focus or the criteria weightage is given to your academics. About 30% of your focus and weightage is given to standardized testing, and about 20% is given to everything else. So now when I talk about the academic component, right? So when universities are evaluating your applications, they look at your academic performance from grade 9 onwards. So they like to see that there is this sort of upward sloping trajectory. You're getting better with each year. Very often in the Indian curriculum, we do find that students focus a lot on their board exams, so 10th grade ICSE, or potentially 12th grade HSC, ISC, or just focus on the IB or whichever curriculum that they're studying. But it is very important to know that for US universities, every term result matters. So your grade 11 tends to be the most important because that is the last set of final results or internal results that you would send to the university before you are given what's called a predicted score. So this upward sloping curve where they're constantly seeing that improvement, or if you've always been good academically, you kind of maintain that level and that standard as you go forward, is extremely essential. The second component that a lot of universities do consider is your course rigor and class rank. So again, a lot of universities don't actually rank students. I mean, a lot of high schools don't actually rank students. What they do is they fit them in a broad pool. So they would say, okay, the top 5%, or you're in the top 10% of your current academic class. So that's an important factor as well. And the second component, which is course rigor, this is primarily for the universities to see that you are challenging yourself academically and that you aren't necessarily taking an easy route with the subjects that you eventually choose. So this is the academic component. The next 30%, which we spoke about, is standardized testing. So I know there's a lot of knowledge and information currently going on with standardized testing with the SATs and ACTs. So essentially the SAT and ACT are two separate tests. Both are accepted by universities in the US, equally accepted, where the SAT is a little bit more focused primarily on math and English, and it's scored on a scale of 1600. The ACT is scored on a scale of 36, which has math, English, and a science component. But the science component in the ACT is not exactly pure sciences. It's a little bit more focused on science-based passages. So it's analyzing data that's already offered and given to you. So you don't have to potentially have prior science knowledge in order to be good at the ACT test as well. So what we recommend is in grade 11, so just before you hit grade 11, so between your grade 10 and grade 11, students try and take a diagnostic test. They try to determine which is a better fit for them by understanding naturally where their inclination lies between the SAT or the ACT. So that becomes a crucial part of a lot of the US applications. In the last 2 years, though, the SAT has been given slightly less weightage because of COVID. So what has happened is, of course, the test got canceled across the world last year, across India, across Bombay this year. A lot of other cities did offer it as well. So universities did make that as an optional component in the application. For a lot of universities, what that means is that if you have a test score that you feel represents your overall potential, definitely do send the score. However, if you feel like you've taken a standardized test, or if you didn't have the opportunity to take the standardized test, and it didn't go as well as you had planned, you can still apply to these universities without having that test score. And as per the university, this will not impact your application negatively. So it is we're at that cusp where, it's hard to say whether the SAT actually does improve your chances of getting in or not. But I do foresee that in the next couple of years, the test will become, again, an essential part of admissions criteria, especially for top universities. So that's the standardized test component. And the last component, which is essentially now that we have got the grades and the SATs, that's about 80%. So this balanced 20% is what we like to call your standout factor. So your balanced 20% is something that differentiates you from everyone else who is applying to these universities. So while you may have crossed that first academic index of your grade standardized test scores, when you are applying to a lot of these universities, they want to see genuine students, genuine personality outside of just the academic realm. So these standout activities, of course, can range from something you're just genuinely passionate about, something that you love to delve deeper into academically, or something that you've kind of done for the community as well. So when I say passion activities, I mean It could be anything from sports to dance to art to theater, anything that you love to do. It could be writing, any of that. What universities like to see is that there is consistency and effort. So it's something that you started at maybe a slightly younger age, but you've continued to pursue, rather than one of those things where you added on your application just for the sake of adding to your resume, right? That's a really important component that they do consider as well. So that's on the passion front. The second type of activity is sort of a more academic related activity. So this is a way for students to validate their interest in a particular field. So for example, if you said that you love computers, so what have you done to showcase your interest in computers that goes beyond just your high school education? So this could be in the form of job shadowing and internships. It could be in the form of research that you might do. It could be in the form of online courses you may have undertaken, or it could be in the form of, say, a summer school that you decide to attend. So when we say internships and research, of course, it's not easy for high school students to get these opportunities, right? So with internships, we typically do suggest, if there is someone that you can work under, just again, unpaid internship where you have been given a particular project to do. So you learn, as well as, of course, it adds to your resume as well, right? The point of the internship is for students to genuinely understand whether this is an area that they're interested in, or whether, they would rather explore something else. With research, there are now a lot of opportunities for high school students to apply for research-based programs. So with research, of course, while you can always try to work under professors, it's not as easy, again, as a high school student, but there are a couple of more competitive programs that you can apply for in order to do some kind of research. And essentially what they do is they place you with, say, either a PhD student or a professor at a university that's doing research in a field that you would potentially like to. So again, this does require a considerable amount of dedication from a student, where of course they need to be genuinely interested in that field in order to pursue, say, a 6 weeks or 8 weeks of a research paper that they're doing with them. Okay. The third area, which is community service. So this is a interesting one, because a lot of students think that with community service, they just need to check mark a box and go teach and do it for the sake of doing it. That's actually not what's going to add value in your application at all. Essentially, with community service, they want to see what you're passionate about. So they want to see what areas that you enjoy doing, how you genuinely want to contribute to the environment or society around you. And that passion could be for any sort of cause. It could be focused on education, it could be focused on health, it could be focused on environment, but anything that genuinely drives you, right? It's more than just volunteering at a particular place. It's actually finding a way to make your initiative a little bit more sustainable, in a sense that if you've kind of worked at an organization and taught math and English, of course, it adds value. However, on the other hand, if you've been able to kind of create or mold some sort of curriculum for that particular NGO or for that school, that sort of curriculum is something that the school can take forward even when you leave. So that sustainable impact is really important for students to have. And it doesn't have to be a large scale. It could be the smallest thing that they do, but actually genuinely being interested in it. So again, this community service aspect, again, a lot of students think I need to add it on my resume. It only adds value if it's something genuine and if it's something that you have been doing for a longer period of time. At the end of the day, the universities do want to see that you've got a slightly more holistic profile, right? They want to see that you're telling a story. It brings out some aspect or some element of your personality through it as well, right? So they like to see more visual methods of you sort of showcasing it on your application. So a lot of universities do not actually look at recommendation letters or purely certificates. They like to see some of the real work you may have done. So this could be in the form of pictures, videos, testimonials, actually having a website, depending on the initiative that you've done. So there's a lot of different ways to actually make that entire aspect a little bit more visual and a little bit more appealing to the universities as well. So ultimately, with your extracurricular activities, I like to sort of look at three main things. One, which is consistency, that's key. The second, which is focus on quality rather than quantity. So do fewer activities, but do them really well, as opposed to trying to spread yourself too thin. and trying to kind of delve into every single thing that you could potentially get your hands on, right? And the last component, which is the tangibility, which is essentially how you showcase it to each of the universities. Okay, I will go into the admission criteria for Canadian universities. So again, like I mentioned, Canada is the cousin of the US. So a lot of what you kind of do for US universities gets covered in your Canada applications as well. So here, essentially, the only big difference is that Canadian universities do not require you to take standardized tests. So no SATs, no ACTs. The main aspect that they focus on, that 80% of weightage is still given to your academics, and that 20% of weightage is still given to the extracurricular activities that you pursue throughout high school. Okay. And now, like I said, spectrum becomes very different with the UK. So when you're looking at UK university applications, it's completely different from how the US and Canadian universities evaluated. Given that the UK is a little bit more focused in their overall approach, the same goes with the entire application process. So their essential focus is on your grade 10 results. So ICSE, IGCSE, MYP, whichever curriculum the student is studying, your grade 10 results and your grade 12 predicted scores. So your grade 12 predicted scores are something that you would get from the school or college that you're in. So essentially what the counselor in your school would do is would give the university a particular score they expect you to achieve at your final grade 12, okay? Once you've got these two components in place, the universities in the UK typically give you something called a conditional offer. So your conditional offer would, it's kind of like a personalized cutoff where essentially the conditional offer would state, okay, we will accept you into our university as long as you get a 90% in your final exams, or as long as you get all A's in your A levels, or as long as you get a 38 in your IB, right? So once you've got your final 12th grade results, only then do you know whether your offer stands or not, right? So 90% of weightage is given to the academic component, and the balance 10% of weightage is given to, I don't want to say just your personal statement, but any activities that you've done that link to your course of interest. Because essentially your personal statement is an essay that you're going to write that's primarily focused on why you want to study a particular course, what you want to study within that course, what you hope to do with that course in the future, and why you're a good fit for it. So essentially anything that you have done that validates this interest. So again, that entire academic related bucket that we spoke about earlier holds really, really important for the UK, right? Because essentially, if you've done an internship or you've done research or if you've done any kind of experience that showcases why you want to study this course or program, it is only going to add value to your UK university applications. Another very important component to keep in mind with the UK application is that you can only apply to 5 universities. So the application itself restricts you to 5 universities, where you do typically apply for a similar course at all 5. And that's primarily because the personal statement that you write is going to go to all of your universities. So unlike the US, where you write an individual essay for every university you apply to, in the UK, that one essay is going to all of the universities you apply to. So if your essay is focused on economics, then it becomes hard to justify to a college that you've applied for, say, engineering, or you may have applied for another program, because your entire personal statement would be economics focused. Now, when you're looking at the newer age Indian universities, so Ashoka, Kriya, Jindal, Flame, while all of them have a slightly different process of, at least evaluating applications, they do kind of course, look at your academics. And here the academics they look at is, again, your 10th grade, your 11th grade, and your 12th grade predicted score. So all 3 components. Typically, they would have an aptitude test or accept the SAT or ACT score. So typically, Ashoka would have their own Ashoka aptitude test that you would need to do. They will also evaluate your profile. And by profile, I mean your extracurricular activities. They take a look at your essays. But a very big component of the entire application process is your interview or on-the-spot essay they might have. So a lot of these Indian universities now do different styles of interviews. So it could be either a one-on-one interview, it could be more case study oriented, it might be a group environment, so they understand how you work as a collaborative team. And that becomes another very big part of the entire application and evaluation process. Okay, so this is a broad comparison of how the application criteria works in each of these countries. Like I said, the US is a little bit more broad in terms of what they look at. The UK is a little bit more focused and specific. Singapore follows a very similar system to the UK, and Canada follows a very similar system to the US admissions criteria. All right. And for all of the parents out there who need to know the cost of education. So cost of education, of course, varies quite a bit. So I'll talk a little bit about cost. I'll talk a little bit about scholarships and, the kinds of things that are offered in general. So typically in the US, and because it's a four-year education, a lot of the private universities can go up to $85,000 US a year. And this is overall cost of attendance. A lot of the state universities can be anywhere between $55,000-$65,000 US per year. In the UK, as a 3-year education, it goes to about 35,000 to about 45,000 pounds. Canada tends to be, again, 4 years. So again, this is very dependent on university and very dependent on the course and program you apply to in Canada. But again, it's approximately, I would say, that 55,000 in the lower spectrum to 80,000 Canadian dollars in the higher spectrum. And Singapore is closer to that 50,000 to that 60,000 sort of Singapore dollar range. So a lot of it depends on the university and depends on the course or program. The biggest scholarship opportunities are typically in Canada and the US. Both do give a lot of merit-based opportunities for students, slightly less so in the UK. And with Singapore, they typically have something, at least as of now, called a Singapore bond, a government bond, which you can subsidize your education if you commit to working in Singapore post your education for a few years. That bond is still, well, it's been under review for the last couple of years, but as of now, it still stands while you're there. Yeah, I know that was quite a bit of information. I hope I've covered a good amount of information as well. I can leave it open to questions if that's okay.
Thank you, Alisha. It is very, very comprehensive. Takes us back to not only our own school, college days, but then our children and now even our grandchildren. Some people's grandchildren would also be at that level. Thank you so much.
Alisha, could I request you to stop sharing the presentation, please,
yes,
so that we can have the full screen view? Thanks. Thank you.
So I think, I mean, from the gist of what you've said, it's very clear that the US education is more sort of broad-based and not so academic-oriented in terms of, choosing the right, the person. So that gives people an idea of where to apply. Can we throw it open to questions now? Any questions from prospective?
We have a question from Satyan, so I'll just add him on. And
Satyan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Alisha, that was fantastic. I mean, really extensive. You've covered quite a lot in just 20 minutes and given us a bird's eye view of the whole thing. I had a little bit of a different question. I wanted to know that, do you also mentor the kids who go there for the cultural change that they will encounter?
It is a little harder to do that, to be honest, but honestly, when we like to kind of build a good rapport with a lot of the students, so before they go, we do run a session that just kind of introduces them to, different cultures in the sense that, what to expect non-academically as well as academically, small things like here, students don't necessarily think about plagiarism and areas like that, which we also do like to introduce them to while they're going there. And then, of course, on a one-on-one basis, a lot of them come back to us with questions, more personal questions, more focused on, if I'm going to a university in the middle of nowhere, how do I manage that? If I'm going to a big city, then how do I manage that? Talking a little bit about finances, different aspects, because I think here a lot of students are still not as independent, because of course they are living at home in that sense, but just kind of how to become a little bit more independent when they go there, and some do's and don'ts for sure.
Thank you.
I think we have a question from Anand Dalal.
Hi, Alisha again. There's a big debate whether kids should do the IB or should do an HSC. So, so is there a preference that universities see abroad? Obviously, with IB preferring because similar to their curriculum, but does that mean that HSC has a negative weightage? And second, what is your opinion on studies in Australia?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the IB versus the Indian curriculum debate is definitely a very extensive ongoing debate. A couple of points over there. So it's a little bit country specific. When you are looking at universities in Canada and US, they accept all of the boards pretty much equally. So you can be an IB student, HSC student, ISC student, A-level student, and have equal opportunity of getting admission into these universities. When you're looking at the UK, it's a little different because sometimes universities like Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial, LSC, they have a slight preference for either the A-level curriculum or the IB curriculum. The rest of the universities are quite open to any other curriculum that you might study. And Singapore, again, is completely open to any curriculum that you study. Only their requirements might vary based on the curriculum. So, for example, if you are an HSC student applying to a university in Singapore, they might need you to take the SAT, as opposed to if you were an IB student applying to Singapore, where they might not require the SAT. So just small variations over there. All in all, I think it would just be very dependent on which country you want to look at eventually. I think the only consideration I keep and kind of the asterisk that I put there is for LSE, Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial, UCL, which are some of the UK ones that have definitely got a preference for the international boards. To answer the second question with Australia, I think Australia education is also very, very good. I think it kind of follows a similar system to the UK. The Australian education for certain courses. So if you were looking at, say, physiotherapy, sports medicine, sports psychology, marine biology, they're very strong programs that you can study in Australia for sure. If you are looking a little bit more in like engineering and the, say business side of things, or if you want that liberal arts and humanities flexibility, I think then I would probably consider the UK or US or Canada over Australia instead.
Thanks, Alisha.
The next question is from Aditya Shah.
Yeah, hi. I had a quick question, Alisha. Thanks a lot for the presentation. But do you also does OnCourse also specialize in like MBA programs, and like what percentage of your students apply to MBAs versus undergrad? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a complete postgraduate team that works with all kinds of master's applications as well as MBA applications. With MBA, of course, if you have those few years of work experience, then we can guide students with applications anywhere in the world, because the process is quite similar in terms of your storyboarding and your GMAT and what universities are looking for. So yes, absolutely, we do have an entire team for that as well.
Thank you. I think we have no more questions.
Alisha, how do we connect with President? How do we connect with Alisha?
Sure, I can share my contact details if that helps.
Yeah, please do that. If you could just send it through to Satyan, and Satyan will, give it to the Rotary office.
I have them. I'll share it with.
I've also just added it on the chat, so in case anyone wants to copy paste it.
Great. Thank you.
Sherni, one question I have.
Yes.
Alisha, another important thing that the parents really face and students face is the issue of taking loans from banks. This is a very complex question, I have to tell you, because the students are running pillar to post to find the best possible deal to get monies, because getting a loan. Do you also assist them and direct them in some ways?
Yeah, so there are 2 or 3 companies that we have worked with that kind of give student loans in the past. Of course, loans from India always do come at a much higher rate than, say, loans if you were, taking a loan from the US. But yeah, there are 2 or 3 different companies we usually connect them to in order to. There are some companies, for example, that do dollar-denominated loans, so that just varies. So yeah, we do kind of connect you with them as well.
Shehnaz, I wanted to say something.
Yes.
I wanted to say that my daughter, we were with OnCourse this year, and my daughter Ridhima, and now she's in the US. She went to August. She went in August, and OnCourse and Alisha were absolutely fantastic in holding her hand and guiding her through the entire process. And so I would, at a personal level, I had a great experience, and I would certainly suggest OnCourse to all the Rotarians if they're looking out for a counselor or guidance for their children looking at an education overseas or anywhere for that matter.
Thank you so much. It was very
Thank you,
good to work
Abhishek.
with Ridhima.
Thank
you.
Annie, I have a quick question if I can ask.
Sure.
So Alisha, thank you for the wonderful talk, and many congratulations for doing something like this at your age. OnCourse has a wonderful name. So congrats to your team. The question I have is that, today this business has become quite large and there's so many players, and every student is really getting their essays written by others and getting coached on what to do and getting set up with sort of internships that they like. I feel that I don't know how the student can really stand out because everyone's being helped, everyone's being coached. How does the student really stand out?
I think so. That's a very good question, actually. I think there's 2 or 3 things. So from my experience, or in my experience, when I see an essay that's written by someone externally, and when I see an essay written by a student themselves, it's very easy for me to tell. Because you can see, so when you're actually writing your essays for university, it's not a writing competition that they're looking at. They want to see the content, they want to see your passion, genuinity that comes through the essay and that reflects through the essay. So the minute you get someone else to write your essay for you, I do think it loses that entire that entire personal side of it. And if I can tell that, I'm 100% sure the admissions officers who read millions of applications can tell that too. So that's on the essay component. I think another very big part of, at least in the last 2-3 years, what I've noticed is, besides, of course, students doing lots of very interesting extracurricular activities, I feel like 2 things. One, which is the students who do fewer activities but do it consistently. So starting, when they were 9 or 10, it's just genuine passion that they had for it, not doing it for the purpose of application. And I've really gone in depth into that. It's very different. That resume looks very different from a student who's adding in application stuff, which comes in say 10th grade or 11th grade, just for the sake of it. Again, very easy to tell the difference between those 2. And the third component, which has become really big, is recommendation letters. So your school recommendation letters that your counselor gives you, your teachers give you, that is a complete unbiased view, for a university to see what you're like as a person and what you're like in the classroom. Because if they are saying that, you're extremely passionate about one thing, but your resume and application shows something completely different, they are going to see that disparity and that disconnect as well. So while I think everyone's applications do stand out in different ways, there are small factors that can show whether you're genuine about it or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, that's why a lot of our Rotractors who do join the Rotary movement spend 2, 3, 4 years, giving back to society, doing part of our projects. And I think that certainly will help them in the future. In this matter, I just wanted to inform all our members that we are starting a satellite club for the younger generation between the years of 21 and 35, where people will be able to join as a member. They may not be a voting member, but they will have a lot of the rights of a Rotarian, but they will also be able to join our meetings. Besides that, they will have much lower fees, and they will be able to have meetings on their own terms. They will be able to go to even online meetings, even after our physical meetings start. So there are a lot of advantages, and just want to keep most of our Rotarians involved, that any of their children want to join the satellite club, they can, get more information from us. Mehul, you have a question, is it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I think there's one last question, Alisha.
Hi, Alisha. I was a bit confused when the meeting started, whether I was in the BIS meeting or the Rotary meeting.
I know.
But we'll discuss this in more detail later. But we are very confused, that some universities don't accept or don't need SAT and ACT. So one is, should we still take it? And second, if a student decides not to take it, then what is it that they should do to kind of fill up that 30%?
Yeah, I think, so in terms of SAT, ACT, if you're applying this year, it is, like I mentioned, less essential. I would take it if it is a very ambitious student who is looking at applying to absolute top universities for sure, because I think at the end of the day, right now, the SAT is not offered in a lot of centers in Bombay, but it is offered in a lot of parts of India and also globally. So eventually, I do think that SAT can provide that little bit more of a balanced tool for some of the top universities to evaluate the applications. So if you are kind of aiming for some of the top colleges, I would suggest still taking it. In the worst case scenario, if you don't do as well in it, you have that luxury of not sending the score as well. So, keeping that in mind. And I think the second question was related to
what do you do if you decide not to take the SAT or the ACT?
Yeah, so essentially what happens in that case, that 30% moves to the academic component. So that 80% becomes academic, the 20% still remains as your extracurriculars. However, again, like I mentioned, very importantly, the recommendation letters are going to play a big role in the entire process. So something that I felt wasn't as important maybe 5-6 years ago has started to gain a lot more importance in the last few years, especially when students have moved and transitioned from that offline school to online school, how they've managed that transition. So I think the recommendation letter part of it is super essential. So just kind of building that rapport with your counselor, with your teachers in school, so they also know what you've been doing and what you've been working on as well. But essentially that kind of just falls into the academic bucket altogether. If you really do want to challenge yourself, and this is very case by case, it's not something I would recommend to all students. You can take, say, some APs or some more challenging courses outside of your curriculum. But again, not as a bottom line, I don't suggest this to everyone. I would say it's very case by case.
There was one question on the chat about software which detects plagiarism. Is there any such thing?
There is. We don't actually use any software that detects plagiarism because I think, at least with most of the university essays, they are very personal topics. It is extremely hard to plagiarize those. I also don't think that would, unless you're using information from an online resource, I don't think that would even show up in the plagiarism checker. But there does exist software that can do a general plagiarism check.
Right. Thank you. Akshay, can I request you to give a vote of thanks?
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Alisha. It was wonderful to hear from you, and thank you for making that so easy for us to understand. So really appreciate the afternoon you've spent with us, and as a token of our appreciation, we will on your behalf plant 10 fruit-bearing trees at Nilmati Dandwal Gram Panchayat, Maharashtra, and the said certificate will be forwarded to you shortly.